Okay, hi everyone. Part 6 ended halfway through pretty abruptly because I had a technical difficulty that went on for about an hour, so have to redo it. But here we are. This is part 6 continued, Chad according to Chad. There's a lot to get past, and get on to still. So, welcome to Left Undone, Incomplete Investigations. Let's go with part B of part 6. I'm Kathy Brooks. So the last thing I said on this episode was, I've shared a list of all of Chad's power and control issues, how he has to be right all the time, uses fear to control, creates financial chaos, gaslights, shifts blame. These are all the elements of coercive control. Maybe not a textbook case, but so much of Chad's behavior points to mental cruelty. And Chad was free to get away with it, because he put a big religious bow on top and called it prophecy. So was Chad a guy who desired power? Oh yeah. And once Chad became a speaker, it got worse. Let's go back to how Chad met Melanie Gibb at the Prepper Gathering in Morgan, Utah in July of 2017. That's going to help us transition from talking about Chad's power motives to the sex motives for the crimes. Chad had been friends with David Warwick, the other questionable prophet, since according to David, about 2015 is when they became friends. David Warwick was very vague about how he met Chad Daybell. He testified that he met Chad via phone and that Daybell wanted to do a book with David Warwick. Also, Warwick testified under oath that he didn't feel Chad was the right one to do this book with. It was a burn, but unclear why David felt that way. Chad and David's visions were very similar. It sounded like they wrote their scripts together. Foreign invasions, earthquakes, the saved, living in beautiful white tent cities. Sound familiar? Did they have creative differences when aligning all their fake visions and copying each other's ideas? Maybe David's earthquakes cracked in a different place than Chad's did in Utah. His white tents were more beige. I don't know. There were some creative differences, clearly. So David Warwick gave a talk about his visions in 2016 at this prepper camp. And just 1 year later, in July of 2017, Chad Daybell was there giving one of his talks. So if you have to define the moment the torch was passed on to Chad, it's then. But before we completely leave this topic, one more amusing, eye-rolling fact. You know, I just said that Chad and David had visions of tent cities in the New Jerusalem. Are you surprised that their followers were encouraged to buy as many of these expensive tents as they could afford? Didn't think so. So this prepper camp we're talking about was held in Morgan, Utah, at a place called Typhy Ranch. The guy who owned Typhy Ranch, a man who offered his property to hold their annual campout, he owns, wait for it, Bare Bones Tent Company. He sells big tents. Now, okay, disclaimer here. I'm not implying that the ranch owner is part of some kind of tent selling racket or a scam. Actually, it looks like the ranch is owned by a great family dedicated to sustainable farming. That's why I'm not mentioning their name. But yet, another absurd, funny detail. All in a day's business, right? If the Lord wants people to buy 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of his big expensive tents, hallelujah. But let's get back to talking about Chatty Boy, Chatty Daddy, Chins Chud. His quest for money, power, and sex. Here's a bit of information about Chad that speaks to someone who wants all 3. David Warwick's testimony about Chad trying to get him to collaborate on a book, more evidence that Chad used AVOW to hunt down potential NDE authors. According to Chad sometimes turned up at people's houses without warning. Hi, it's me, Chad. You know, me, Chad. Maybe it was a skill he learned as a door-to-door missionary, but Chad wrote that the voice told him to go knock on AVOW members' doors to tell them he'd been told by the Lord that they needed to write a book. Can you imagine? Just imagine, I'm imagining Chad thinking someone meeting him will be thinking, oh my God, this is a thrilling celebrity event. It's Chad. It's me, Chad, AVOW celebrity. It's me, Chad, AVOW celebrity, at your service, at your front door. Your posts about dreams and dystopian visions caught my expert eye. I think you might just have a book in you. What do you think? With my help, I'm Chad Daybell, I think you and I could create something to improve my world. Improve the world. And then he starts interrogating them to determine if they are frauds, right? Wait a minute, I gotta make sure you're not a fraud. But that is just more bizarre Chad behavior. But here's another situation that Chad has created that gives Chad quite a bit of freedom to have a secret life if he wants one. Chad writes that Tammy was used to the voice saying it was okay for Chad to just abandon her at social events, to jump in the car and go on a cold call to fulfill his mission and find these NDE authors. Hey babe, I'll be right back. I got a hot minute with the possible NDE author. I got to go check out their story. Oh, Tammy, just think about it. Chad's collaboration with Julie Rowe set up a situation where he could be free to use his cell phone at any hour without Tammy questioning him. Now we learn that Chad has got Tammy accepting that the voice could tell Chad at a moment's notice that he needs to leave the house and travel somewhere at any time of day or night because the voice told him to. So, for a husband who wants to cheat, that's a pretty convenient setup, don't you think? Twice, that we know of, Chad wrote up phony letters for Lori to send to him to trick Tammy into thinking he was going on business trips. One in April of 2019 and another in June of 2019. So he signed the April one from a fictitious person in Texas named Karen Walker. And the other he signed, Charles Vallow. KK Walker was one of Lori's secret email accounts. Now, knowing what we know about Chad and all his movies and TV and all that kind of craziness that he's all obsessed with, Is it significant that Walker is what they called zombies in The Walking Dead? They were actually written, these letters, so he could hook up with Lori. And they used books and book writing as excuses. Chad obviously wrote these letters. They have all the earmarks of Chad's writing. Blah, blah, blah. Chad, you're so great. People love you. Chad, I need your expertise. Chad even signed the one from Charles with admiration and mentions, which is 100% tell, a mentions sports. All so he could bonk Lori. Question for you, and this is about the sex motive, the sex motive. Do you think Lori Vallow was Chad's first affair? A really troublesome detail that came out of Lori's trial was how fast and how sneaky he was with that first burner phone that he bought to communicate with Lori. Chad left the conference on Saturday afternoon, October 27th, 2018. He activated a Cricket burner phone to talk to her on Wednesday, October 31st, 4 days later. Now, 3, if you take Sunday out of the equation, because, on Sunday, Chad was a TBM. True Blue Mormon on Sunday. He was immediately secretive about Lori. He hid things, and he hid things fast. And the fact that he named his phone Boyd Dial after an Idaho LDS bishop and stake president he knew was dead, that shows a level of deviousness right from the get-go. Think about it. First of all, it's disgusting and so disrespectful. Second, he could send messages that looked like confidential religious conversations. And if anyone tried to track Boyd Dial down, they'd find out that he was dead. It's sick. And if Tammy found the phone, Chad could say, "Oh, I found that phone at church," something bogus like that. So again, do you think this was the first time Chad strayed from the marriage? Let's look at a few things and ask yourself if this sounds like someone who had never cheated before. Getting a burner phone so quickly and naming it after a dead bishop makes me think Chad, at the very least, had some kind of experience with burner phones. This sounds like someone who's been caught in inappropriate cell phone calls before and has learned some lessons about secrecy. If this was a guy's first affair, his first burner phone, would he know how to do all this? It doesn't feel like this is his first burner phone. Not his first rodeo. Not in my opinion. In Lori's trial, FBI agent Nicole Heidemann testified that Chad had nine numbers. Lori and Alex, both criminals, as we know, only had 6 each. Why did Chad have 9 numbers? Why would anyone need that many numbers unless they're hiding something? 9 phones makes you think Chad was hiding quite a bit. Chad specialized in jobs that gave him the freedom to come and go as he pleased. Even the sexton jobs he took gave him more freedom than the average 9 to 5. Spanish Fork Cemetery has 32 acres, and Springville Evergreen Cemetery, 51.68 acres. That's a lot of freedom. We just discussed how Chad wrote in his braggy Chad way, that Tammy was used to him getting up and taking off from home, meetings, family events at any time, saying the voice told him he was needed somewhere to fulfill a mission. And we also talked about how in 2014, he set up another situation where he could text at any time freely without suspicion. And last, but not least, well, maybe least, the article he wrote about grocery stores. Let's just say, Chad is sleazy. That guy who wrote about returned missionaries and pseudo hunks prowling grocery store aisles looking for love, looking for action. Any of those things on their own could be nothing, but all together, Chad, he sure had a good setup for someone who wanted to cheat. So Chad's desire for money, power, and sex in that list, and as usual, he wanted freedom. But freedom to do what? A letter to Chad from Susan Freeman might give us a hint. Only 1 month before Chad will meet Melanie Gibb, Susan Freeman writes a letter to Chad. Remember her? Chad's first NDE author, the one who met George Washington and some of the founding fathers in her NDE. Well, Suzanne doesn't like what she sees or hears about Chad. In June of 2017, she writes, I do not agree with what you are publishing. What you are publishing is false. I know without a shadow of a doubt what you are preaching will not lead to happiness. It will lead to death and sorrow. I feel sorry for those who have been caught up in all those lies. She also writes, I have not seen any royalties since last year. So Chad's not paying his authors. What's going on, Chad? I mean, really, seriously, what's going on? Chad's not writing. He's not doing one of the most basic parts of his job as a publisher. Were the Daybells in financial trouble again? Bookmark that. If the Daybells were going under again, this could have been a money motive for Tammy's life insurance. Chad and Tammy increased her life insurance shortly before she died. Remember? That doesn't look good for Chad. But Chad clearly doesn't care about Suzanne or what Suzanne thinks, nor does he send her the money he owes her. He doesn't address her concerns. He pays her royalties, get this, by selling her back her own books at cost. And Chad moves on to bigger things in his mind. This is about the same time a lot of people Chad's getting to know are buying into the idea of spiritual wifery. Suzanne isn't his spiritual wife. A wife wouldn't tell him what he's publishing is false. A wife wouldn't call him a liar. A wife is supposed to agree with him, trust that he's always right, and smile all the time. Chad doesn't need Suzanne. It's the summer of 2017, and he still has Julie. And within a few weeks, the Arizona girls will come into his life. After his unpleasant letter exchange with Suzanne Freeman, Chad travels to Morgan, Utah, to the hayfields, where 200 people have assembled to hear his wisdom. And by tense. July 2017 is right about the time, too, when Chad is launching his Glimpses Beyond the Veil CD digital download series. The one where he asks people to put on their curious caps and listen to him offer his curious mix of religion, like his topic, earning our place in heaven, ghost stories like our deceased relatives are eager to assist us, channeling spirits like what spirits do after they die, and fear-mongering like angelic warnings about America's future. After the Morgan, Utah talk, Melanie Gibb, a blonde, very attractive Southern belle who's living in Arizona, she comes up to him and starts talking to him, like they were old friends. Chad writes about this, still doing Chad according to Chad, with her charming Southern accent. And before you know it, Chad has put Melanie Gibb in the little black book in his head. He's going to use her too. But do you think she was a candidate for his next spiritual wife? She seemed to have all the qualifications. A nice figure, cute as a button, definitely a smiler. And she and Chad have so much in common. She thinks he's great and his ideas are fascinating. And, well, he does too. 2018, in February, Tammy's posting pictures of a Daybell daughter's wedding on Facebook. In March of 2018, according to FBI agent Nicole Hedeman, Chad Googles malachite for the first time, a potentially poisonous gemstone that, in less than 2 years, will decorate his finger as a wedding ring. A very weird detail, right? So it came from Chad, not Lori. And 2018, not 2019. What was the significance of malachite? I'm still very curious on that one. As of the summer of 2018, Chad's becoming more popular. People are buying into his Glimpses Beyond the Veil series. He learns he's going to be a grandpa, and one of his sons gets married. Time is moving on for Chad. He's not a young man anymore. It's time to face the fact that he's moved into the autumn season of his life. But he can't. The voice just won't let him forget Melanie Gibb. He writes that she is like a summer breeze. Summer breeze. He keeps seeing her name, hearing her voice. She's starting to make a name for herself. So another beautiful woman's coattails to ride. In June of 2018, The Voice tells him to call her. The Voice wants him to give a talk in her hometown of Mesa, Arizona. Melanie, she's gracious, she's warm and hospitable. Not a surprise that sweet, charming, competent Melanie knows how to organize a successful venue. But Melanie also knows how to throw Chad a curveball, which we all know by now, Chad probably lacks the ability to catch. Double D Dalton could catch it, but Chad, nope. Poor Chad. 39th best athlete. Maybe if she put it on a T-ball stick, might work then. Melanie's curveball. She says she'll plan everything for Chad to give a talk in Mesa, Arizona, but she's going to arrange for him to share the stage with another preparing a people AVAL superstar, a guy by the name of Jason Mao. Another man will be on the scene. Chad writes that he was delighted that she included Jason. Sure, Chad. So Arizona may not have bagged him a spiritual wife, but this trip to Arizona is fateful. It opened new doors of possibility for Chad. He'll talk Melanie into writing a book, make connections to participate in her Time to Worry Up podcasts, where he will share that he met Jesus in a bathroom.
That was not Jesus, Chad.
And, as most of us know, Melanie will introduce him to none other than Lori Vallow. So what did Melanie Gibb end up being to Chad? We're going to start wrapping up this series with a side story. And then the forensic science tip I promised to tell you about at the end. The first story has to do with Melanie Gibb, who probably had no idea about this at all. It's going to explain a lot about what was going on inside Chad's head, though. Maybe thoughts he'd had for years. It involves Daybell family history. Sex, breaking laws, rationalization of bizarre ideas, everything. Fasten your seatbelts because this is a really crazy ride. We all know by now that Chad not only thinks of himself as a holy being, he has special supernatural explanation for everything, right? He has all the answers, knows who's dark and light, claims he knows who everyone was in a past life. So there had to be an extra special reason why he was having the desire to cheat on Tammy, because it seems like it was there for a long time. Whether he acted on it, we don't know. But less than a year into their marriage, Chad was writing about planning funerals and prowling the aisles of supermarkets in hopes of meeting women. When Tammy almost dies in childbirth, he encourages her to have another child. When Chad's business is a failure and she's not smiling all the time, he has a vision that she's going to die young, and then publishes it in a book. How do you feel if your husband does that? And different groups of people have come forward to say he was going around saying that for years, that she was going to die young. So what does this have to do with Melanie? From Lori Vallow, Daybell's phone records, we learned that Lori's code name for Melanie Gibb was Phoebe, and it was spelled Phebe. Her number was saved in Lori's phone that way, with the unusual spelling, no O. Turns out the name Phoebe is a clue. Phebe, with that unusual spelling, is a name in the Daybell family histories, the Norths. No one can say he didn't know about his ancestor, Hiram Bennett North. According to Ancestry.com, he had two wives at the same time, Leah, who he married in 1861, and Priscilla Jane, who he married in 1869. Priscilla was 15. Hiram was almost 30. And it wasn't a case of Hiram being a widower, because both women were having babies at the same time. This is 7 years after the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act became law all across the United States and its territories. The Morrill Act was 1862. The act made plural marriages illegal. They were criminal in 1869. But Hiram Bennett North, who was Chad's Grandpa Keith's grandfather, I'll let you get that sorted out in your heads. Chad's grandfather's grandfather was Hiram. And Hiram married a young 15-year-old second wife after Abraham Lincoln made it illegal to do so. Because the American Civil War was going on, the pro-polygamists in Utah figured out there just weren't the funds or manpower from Washington, D.C. to enforce the law. So there were men like Hiram Bennett North who took advantage of this and just went ahead and married themselves an extra wife or two or three if they wanted to, because they felt like it. What does this have to do with Phoebe? Grandpa Keith's grandma was Hiram's first wife. Her name was Leah, married in 1861. Her 10th child was a girl named Phoebe. Same unusual spelling, Phebe. Leah's 13th child was Martha, Grandpa Keith's mother. So why, you ask, was Melanie Gibb Phoebe? Lori gave her the name Phoebe and said she, Melanie, was their daughter Phoebe in a past life. So if you're following all this, that makes... Are you following all this? Chad and Lori are the reincarnated grandpa and grandma of Chad's grandpa Keith, the World War II hero that Chad writes about a lot in his books. The bio grandpa he never knew and is somewhat obsessed with. So, in Chad's warped little mind, Chad has made himself Hiram, the last ancestor to have 2 wives. And if Melanie is Chad and Lori's daughter Phoebe in another life, Lori is Leah, first wife. Phoebe was the daughter of Hiram and Leah. Now, if you're doubting this, the weird spelling of Phoebe gives this story more weight, I think. And Chad has a spiritual, supernatural excuse why Chad's little Chad had all these sexy feelings towards Lori. Of course, it's not because he's human, a jerky human, but a human. It's because he's meant to have 2 wives. And why Tammy isn't Leah, the first wife in Chad's scenario? Working theory. Chad has rewritten history in his head to accommodate that stupid blonde girl prophecy that he got from the woman in New Jersey. Some random woman that he barely knew told him she saw a blonde girl praying by her bed for a husband like Chad. Now, would it surprise you if, with twisted Chad logic, retroactively, he decided Lori was meant to be his first wife all along? That Lori was that little blonde girl praying by her bedside for a husband predicted in New Jersey back in 1989. And that heavenly forces got in the way. If anyone thinks that cheerleader Lori would have given a doofus like Chad the time of day, Tammy really loved him. She saw him as that tall senior classman. He was an older man to her, a returned missionary. Very cool to her. So all very strange and a little horrifying. When you see how many times Chad boasts about going to the library to research family genealogy, if you recall, he even made Tammy quit playing Frontierville to do more genealogy. Does he then use it to explain and justify his need to cheat? It's disgusting. Makes you wonder where Chad found some of the other made-up names. So, Percy, you need to have a few more minutes of patience, please. Okay, so we've arrived at the point where the more well-known parts of Chad's timeline and his texts have been made public. So Chad, of course, met Melanie Gibb at a Preparing a People conference in October of 2018. We know from his texts in the last half of 2018 and into 2019 that Chad's public face has been Preparing a People talks, going home to Tammy, seeing his new grandchildren. But the private Chad is writing devious emails, activating burner phones, requesting dance videos to watch Lori Vallow sing and dance to songs like Just Can't Get Enough, Let's Make Love, I Dreamed a Dream. He will soon be searching the name Ned Snyder in Louisiana obituaries to convince the woman he's having an affair with, Lori Vallow, that her husband is possessed. He'll text people that he's relieved when Charles Vallow is murdered. Relieved at the death of the man who was trying to get Lori psychiatric help. The man who dared to contact Tammy to tell her Chad and Lori were having an affair. Soon, Chad will be telling more people that Tammy will die. Women he's known for less than a year at a Boise PAP conference. Zulema Pastinas, Serena Sharp, Melanie Gibb, and Audrey Baratario. Chad's behavior will get more and more out of control. He'll lead people down darker and darker paths. He'll dispense the worst advice imaginable, dark, light, spiritual ratings for people he doesn't even know. These ratings will eventually indicate who will live and who will die. Lori's husband will die. Her 2 children will die. Chad's wife will die. Lori's brother will die. And for what? Money, power, sex. Something the jurors will have to decide in this upcoming trial, the trial of Chad Guy Daybell, is whether Chad was always a dishonest person with 2 faces, or whether he was a foolish, middle-aged man who distracted himself from his own failures by creating an ideology that made him feel important. When he met up with an unstable woman called Lori Vallow and her homicidal brother, they took his ideology further and more viciously than he could have ever imagined. The jurors will have to decide. I will leave you with this excerpt from Chad's final novel. Chad, according to Chad. Around midnight, Jen was trudging slowly along when she saw an orange flicker about 100 yards off the road. She thought her eyes were deceiving her, but then she heard a voice.
The voice.
It sounded like a woman was singing. Jen lowered Amber to the ground. "Wake up, sweetie. Maybe God has answered your prayer." Jen could faintly see a dirt road that ran along the freeway that seemed to curve toward the location of the fire. She hesitated, knowing that approaching the camp could lead to a horrible ending for both of them. But there was something about the woman's voice that gave her the assurance to at least move closer and see who was singing. "We need to be quiet, okay?" she told Amber, "just in case these are bad people." They left the freeway and walked down the dirt road. Jen could soon see two people around the fire, and one was singing an older tune that Jen recognized.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
That song was confirmation to Jen that she should approach the fire. "Murderers don't sing that song," she said to herself. Will Chad sing this for us? Because apparently murderers don't sing "This Land Is Your Land." Take heed, law enforcement, FBI, CIA. This little tip could save you millions. As for whether or not Chad sings it, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I will be following the trial with all of you. So please hit the like button and subscribe. Click on the bell for notifications when we go live. You've probably noticed by now that I have ended every episode with a reminder of the Tammy Douglas Daybell Foundation charity. I appreciate how all of you have been supporting my channels. But for this series, I also hope you've been able to check out Tammy's foundation website. It was set up by the people who knew her best, her siblings and friends. If you haven't seen it yet, try to visit the Tammy Douglas Daybell Foundation.com. The URL is on the screenshot that I've been sharing at the end of every episode. Probably one of the best ways to honor Tammy is to make sure the children in your life, your community, always have something good to read. Read to little ones, give books or e-readers as gifts to your older ones, and think of Tammy. That's one of the things that matter to her most: books, libraries, and helping children to learn to love to read. And as always, we say, with the seagulls of miracles and protection, rest in peace, JJ, Tylee, Tammy, and Charles. May their memories be eternal. Stay safe, stay well. I'm Kathy Brooks, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Sorry, Jan. The voice.
I'm sorry, Judge. I heard some voices in the corner, and it distracted me. I apologize.
Sorry, John. The voice.